"Sir, this bill is fake, but not in the way you think." Emily Parker said it so quietly that the rain against the windows almost swallowed the words, but Nathan Whitmore heard every syllable. The private dining room of the Glass Harbor sat high inside the Whitmore Grand Hotel in Manhattan. All dark wood, silver flatware, smoked glass walls, and a view of wet city lights stretching over Fifth Avenue. At the center table, Nathan Whitmore, 50 years old, white, billionaire owner of Whitmore Hospitality, leaned back in a tailored charcoal suit with a white formal shirt, a luxury watch, and the stillness of a man who had bought enough rooms to believe every room should obey him. Beside him stood Daniel Cross, his chief operations officer, polished and calm, wearing the kind of smile that made pressure look like courtesy. Emily was 31, white, a waitress in a pressed white shirt, black vest, clean black server apron, and low black shoes. Her light brown hair was tied neatly behind her neck. She held a tray with 2 fresh coffees, not shaking, not shrinking, not trying to look clever. She simply looked at the guest check Nathan had placed near the edge of the table, beneath a folded $100 bill. It was supposed to be a trap. Nathan had said it minutes before she entered, low enough for only Daniel to hear. If she takes the money without questioning the check, we know where the rot begins. He had expected greed, or fear, or the ordinary confusion of someone paid by the hour facing a man whose name was etched on the building. What he did not expect was for Emily to ignore the tip completely. She looked past the total, past the room charge, past the wine line that no one had ordered. Her eyes went straight to the bottom of the check, where a thin string of numbers sat too close to the margin. Nathan's expression hardened. "Miss Parker, most servers thank the guest before they accuse the bill." Daniel gave a soft laugh. "Perhaps she is nervous, Nathan." Emily placed the coffee tray on the service stand with careful hands. The cups settled without a sound. "I am not accusing the bill, sir." Nathan's mouth barely moved. "Bills do not write themselves." "No," Emily said. "That is what worries me." A silence opened around the table. The restaurant manager, standing near the frosted glass door, shifted his weight but said nothing. Outside, rain traced silver lines down the window. Emily reached into her apron pocket for her pen, and for 1 second, a folded diner receipt slipped into view, old and faded, the paper soft at the corners. She touched it once with her thumb, then pushed it back before anyone could read it. Nathan noticed the gesture. Daniel noticed it too. The difference was that Nathan looked annoyed by it, while Daniel looked briefly interrupted. "This was a simple integrity test," Nathan said. "I own this hotel, Miss Parker. I know what my own check looks like." Emily looked at him then, calm enough to make the room feel louder than it was. "Then you should be the first person concerned that someone added something you did not ask for." Nathan stared at her, the fake bill still between them, the $100 tip untouched, and for the first time that night, the waitress did not look caught inside his test. She looked as if she had been waiting for the test to reveal who else was in the room. Nathan Whitmore let the silence stretch until it began to feel like part of the punishment. He did not reach for the bill. He did not reach for the $100 tip. He only studied Emily Parker as if she were another line item in a report that had refused to balance. "You understand," he said, "that accusing a guest check of being false inside my own restaurant is not a small service issue." Emily stood beside the service stand in her pressed white shirt, black vest, and clean black apron, hands relaxed in front of her, eyes steady. "Yes, sir." Daniel Cross leaned back slightly, the way men did when they wanted pressure to look effortless. "Nathan, this is exactly why we run these tests. People get defensive when process touches them personally." The restaurant manager near the door looked at Emily with quiet warning. 2 investors who had stayed after the private meeting watched from the far end of the table, their wine untouched now, their faces curious but not kind. Nathan tapped one finger beside the fake bill. "This check was placed here to measure honesty, Miss Parker. A simple scenario, an incorrect charge, a generous tip, a chance for a server to either correct it or profit from it." Emily glanced at the folded $100 bill, then back at the thin line of numbers at the bottom of the check. "Then it is not simple anymore." The manager stepped forward, voice low. "Emily, perhaps you should let Mr. Whitmore handle this with operations." Emily nodded once, respectful, but she did not move. That small refusal made the room colder. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "I own 83 properties across the country. I do not need a waitress explaining my own operational paperwork to me. One investor gave a small breath of amusement. Daniel smiled at the sound. Emily did not. She had learned long ago that people with power often mistook volume for accuracy and confidence for truth. She looked again at the bottom of the bill, where the extra line sat too neatly to be an accident. Her hand moved toward her apron pocket, stopped before touching it, then returned to her side. The old folded diner receipt remained hidden, but the memory of its thin paper seemed to steady her more than the marble floor beneath her shoes. I am not explaining your paperwork, she said. I am asking why guest paperwork has a back office line on it. Daniel's smile weakened by almost nothing. Almost. Nathan caught the change, but pride reached it first. Back office line? A routing string, Emily said. Small. Easy to miss if you read from the top down. Daniel gave a soft laugh. Most servers read totals. That does not make them auditors. No, Emily said, still polite. But some servers have had to count every dollar twice. The words changed the air without asking permission. The manager looked away. One investor stopped smiling. Nathan looked at Emily's apron, at her low black shoes, at the neat restraint in her posture, and decided again that she must be trying to survive embarrassment by sounding precise. You are making this larger than it is. Maybe, Emily said. But whoever printed this already made it larger than your test. Daniel shifted for the first time, smoothing his cuff as if fabric had offended him. Emily noticed. Nathan noticed Emily noticing. Who printed this check? She asked. No one answered quickly enough. The question stayed on the table longer than the fake bill itself. Who printed this check? It was a simple question, the kind that should have been answered by a manager, a system log, or a shrug. Instead, it made three powerful men look at three different places. The restaurant manager looked toward Daniel Cross. Daniel looked toward Nathan Whitmore. Nathan looked at Emily Parker as if the waitress had moved a piece on a board no one had told her she was allowed to touch. Outside the smoked glass windows, rain blurred Manhattan into silver streaks. Inside the glass harbor, the private dining room felt too polished for discomfort, but discomfort had already found its seat. One of the investors at the far end of the table smiled without warmth. Maybe we should invite her to the next finance meeting, he said. The other investor gave a low chuckle. The manager did not laugh. Emily did not either. She stood with her hands loosely folded over the front of her black apron, her white shirt crisp under the soft light, her face calm enough to make the jokes seem smaller than the people making them. Nathan picked up the fake bill and held it between two fingers. Miss Parker, tell me exactly what you believe you are seeing. His tone said he expected her to fail in detail. Emily looked at the bill, not at the total. A guest check should tell a story from the table, she said. Coffee, wine, dessert, room charge, timestamp, server number, things that happened in the dining room. Daniel leaned forward. And you learned that where? The question was polite on its surface, but everyone heard the floor beneath it. Emily glanced once toward the folded receipt in her apron pocket. It did not come out. Only the corner pressed against the fabric, a faint square beneath black cotton. At a counter with 12 stools and a register that jammed every winter, she said. Nathan's expression shifted by a fraction. Not sympathy. Not yet. Recognition that her answer had not been invented for the room. Daniel's smile returned. A family diner is not a corporate hospitality platform. No, Emily said. It is smaller. Mistakes reach people faster. The manager lowered his eyes. One investor stopped smiling. Nathan looked back at the bottom line on the fake check. The thin routing string sat there like a whisper from another room. You said this line shows where money goes after the guest leaves, Nathan said. Yes, sir. That is a serious claim. It is a small line. Emily paused. That is why it is serious. Daniel exhaled through his nose, controlled, almost amused. Nathan, with respect, she is repeating words she does not fully understand. Routing string, back office, vendor line. These are internal terms. Emily turned to him then, still calm. I did not say vendor line. The room went still. Daniel's mouth remained slightly open, then closed. Nathan saw it. He saw the first true error in the face of a man who had spent years speaking perfectly beside him. Emily looked back at the fake bill, then at Nathan. Her voice stayed low, but it reached every corner of the room. You did. Nathan Whitmore did not answer. For the first time that night, the billionaire's face changed before his words could protect it. Daniel Cross had made only one mistake, but in a room built on polish, one mistake sounded louder than silver hitting marble. He had said vendor line before anyone else had. Emily Parker did not press the point. She did not smile. She did not look victorious. She simply stood beside the service stand in her clean black apron and let the words remain where Daniel had left them. Nathan Whitmore placed the fake bill back on the table with careful control, but his fingers stayed on it for 1 second longer than necessary. Daniel knows the system, he said, as if explaining the mistake to himself before anyone else could. Of course he would know the terminology. Daniel nodded once, too quickly. Exactly. We are turning a routine staff test into a vocabulary exercise. The restaurant manager looked from Nathan to Daniel, then to Emily, his face pale under the warm pendant lights. The two investors had gone quiet. One lifted his water glass, then set it down without drinking. Rain continued to move down the windows, soft and steady, making Manhattan look farther away than it was. Emily looked at the fake bill again. Then she reached into her apron pocket for her order pad. The folded diner receipt came out with it by accident or by habit, its faded paper catching the light for a brief second before she closed her fingers around it. Nathan noticed the old creases. Daniel noticed the way she held it, not like a note, not like a receipt from tonight, but like something too worn to throw away. Emily tucked the old receipt beneath her order pad and looked at the manager. May I ask for a real guest check from this table, printed from the dining system? The manager hesitated. Emily, Nathan turned to him. Can you print one? Yes, Mr. Whitmore. Daniel lifted a hand, still calm, still professional. There is no need to involve live system records. The test check was never meant to be processed. Emily's eyes moved to him. Then a real one will make that clear. The sentence was respectful. That made it harder to refuse. Nathan leaned back, but the old ease did not return to his posture. He picked up his water glass and held it without drinking, his thumb resting against the rim. Print it, he said. The manager left quickly. For a moment, no one spoke. The private dining room had changed from a place where a billionaire tested a waitress into a place where everyone was waiting for paper to tell them who had been careless. Daniel looked toward the door. Nathan, this is exactly how small distractions become reputational problems. Nathan did not answer. His attention had shifted to Emily, to the stillness in her shoulders, to the way her eyes did not follow power but pattern. The manager returned with a clean guest check from the restaurant printer. He placed it beside the fake bill. Emily did not touch either one. She only leaned slightly closer, enough to read, not enough to take control. The real check had the table number, time, server number, coffee, bottled water, and private dining charge. It ended cleanly. The fake bill did not. At the bottom of the fake bill, the strange routing string waited like a second signature. Emily placed her pen gently beside that line, not on it. This one tells what happened at the table, she said. Then she moved the pen to the real check and stopped. And this one knows when to end. No one moved. Nathan looked from one piece of paper to the other, and the room understood, before anyone said it aloud, that the test had stopped belonging to him. The two checks lay side by side under the private dining room light, and for a moment they looked like a lesson no one had meant to teach. The real check ended where a guest check should end. The fake one kept going, carrying a thin routing string beneath the ordinary charges like a secret written in a whisper. Nathan Whitmore stared at both papers, then lifted his eyes toward Emily Parker. He still did not look convinced. Men who owned 83 properties did not surrender certainty easily, especially not in front of investors, managers, and the chief operations officer who had stood beside them for years. There may be testing language built into the mock template, Nathan said. Operations could have used a format from another department. Daniel Cross nodded immediately. Exactly. A recycled template. Nothing more. Emily looked at him, then at the fake bill, then at the untouched $100 tip still folded beside it. Then it should be easy to say which department recycles guest checks with payment routing attached. The manager's face tightened. One of the investors shifted in his chair, no longer amused, no longer comfortable enough to pretend this was only a waitress making noise. Nathan heard the change. It irritated him because he could not control it. Emily stepped slightly closer to the table, careful not to invade Nathan's space, careful not to touch the papers. Her voice stayed even. You wanted to test whether I would take money without questioning the bill. Nathan's expression hardened. That was the point. Then the bill should have tested me. She paused. Not your system. The words were clean. No accusation. No performance. Yet Daniel's eyes moved to the door as if the room had lost its air. Nathan noticed. He looked back at Emily, trying to place the source of her steadiness. She was not speaking like someone repeating a phrase from the internet. She was not guessing upward from a total. She was reading downward, line by line, the way people read when small numbers have once cost them something large. You keep looking at the bottom first, Nathan said. Emily's hand went still near her apron pocket. The folded diner receipt was hidden again, but one pale edge pressed against the fabric. It is a habit, she said. From serving? Daniel asked, too quickly. Emily did not answer him right away. Her eyes lowered, not in shame, but in the brief quiet of someone deciding how much of the past a room had earned. From watching my father close a register after midnight, she said. He used to say the top of a bill is what people want you to see. The bottom is where they hope you are tired. The manager looked at her differently then. So did one of the investors. Nathan did not soften, not fully, but the arrogance in his face lost some of its shape. He looked at the folded edge in her apron pocket, then at the thin line on the fake bill, then at Daniel Cross, whose smile had become too careful to trust. Emily took her pen from the table and set it parallel to the strange line, as if giving Nathan a ruler for the truth without forcing him to measure it. If this came from your test, sir, she said, someone added more than your test. Daniel leaned forward. Nathan, we should handle this privately before a server turns a routine exercise into a corporate rumor. Nathan's eyes did not leave Emily this time. He had finally seen it. She was not afraid of the bill because it was fake. She was afraid because part of it looked familiar. Nathan Whitmore had spent most of his life believing control was a form of intelligence. If a number moved, he wanted to know why. If a manager hesitated, he wanted the reason before the apology. Yet he had placed a fake bill on his own table to test a waitress, and now the waitress was the only person in the room asking the question that sounded less like service and more like survival. Daniel Cross leaned toward him, his voice lowered into the private tone of old trust. Nathan, this is exactly the kind of thing we should review upstairs. Not in front of staff. Not in front of investors. The word staff landed softly, but Emily Parker felt its weight. She did not flinch. She stood in her pressed white shirt and black vest, the folded diner receipt hidden again in her apron pocket, its worn corner pressing against her like a small reminder to keep reading what other people skipped. Nathan looked at Daniel, then at the manager, then at the two checks lying side by side. His confidence had not disappeared. It had changed shape. It was no longer certainty. It was resistance. Print the audit trail, he said. The manager blinked. For the test check, Mr. Whitmore? For both. Daniel's jaw tightened so briefly that only someone watching patterns would have seen it. Emily saw it. Nathan saw Emily see it. The manager moved to the service terminal near the frosted glass wall, his hands careful as he entered credentials. A small printer began to hum. Rain tapped against the windows, gentle and steady, as if the city had decided to whisper instead of speak. While they waited, Nathan turned back to Emily. Why does that line bother you so much? His voice was quieter now. Not kind. Not yet. But no longer dismissive. Emily looked at the fake bill without touching it. Because it does not belong where people are looking. That is not an answer. It is the first answer people ignore. Daniel exhaled. You are making poetry out of a formatting issue. Emily finally looked at him. No, sir. Formatting mistakes look lazy. This looks careful. The room changed again. The investors stopped shifting. The manager, still at the terminal, paused for half a second before pressing print. Nathan's eyes narrowed, not at Emily this time, but at the paper. You have seen this before. It was not a question. Emily's hand moved to her apron pocket and drew out the folded diner receipt just enough for her thumb to rest on its faded edge. She did not unfold it. She did not offer it. I have seen small lines make honest people feel foolish for questioning them, she said. My father used to run a diner off Route 30 in Pennsylvania. Nothing fancy. 12 stools. 2 booths. A pie case that fogged every morning. Her voice stayed level, but something older moved beneath it. He trusted people who spoke like paperwork was too complicated for him. By the time he learned to ask about the last line, the diner was already gone. Nathan lowered his gaze. The fake bill seemed different now. Not larger. Smaller. More dangerous because it had been made to look unimportant. The printer stopped. The manager returned with 2 narrow audit slips and placed them beside the checks. He looked at Nathan before stepping back. Daniel reached for one of the slips. Nathan lifted one hand, stopping him without touching him. No, the word was calm. Final. Emily looked down at the first slip. The real check showed the restaurant terminal, the manager identification, the normal dining system. The second slip carried a different path. Not proof of everything. Not yet. But enough to make the air leave Nathan's face. The fake bill had not come from the training folder. It had been opened through an operations override that only Daniel Cross was supposed to approve. Nathan Whitmore looked at the operations override line as if it had been written in a language he should have known by birth. Daniel Cross stood beside him, still composed, still wearing the face of a man waiting for confusion to save him. That only means my office prepared the test, Daniel said. You asked for discretion. I handled it. The answer was smooth enough to survive a smaller room. This room had Emily Parker in it. She did not step forward. She did not touch the audit slips. She only looked at the second one, then at the bottom of the fake bill. May I ask one more thing? Nathan's voice came out lower than before. Ask. Emily pointed with her pen, stopping just above the strange routing string. If this was only a test for me, why does the routing line have a vendor prefix instead of a training prefix? Daniel's eyes went flat for a second. Nathan caught it. The manager caught it. Even the investors, who knew very little about restaurant billing and a great deal about self-protection, caught enough to go still. Nathan turned to the manager. Call finance. Now. The manager used the service phone near the wall. No one sat down. No one drank the cooling coffee. Rain tapped the windows like a clock, refusing to hurry. When the finance controller answered, Nathan did not explain the humiliation in the room. He only read the prefix from the fake bill. The woman on the phone was silent long enough for Daniel to say, Nathan, do not make a corporate matter out of a mock check. Nathan held up one hand. Let her answer. The controller's voice returned carefully. That prefix routes to harbor supply adjustment. Emily closed her eyes for half a breath, not in surprise, but in recognition. Nathan's face lost color slowly. Is that an active vendor? Another pause. Yes. It has been receiving service correction payments from several properties for approximately 8 months. The private dining room seemed to shrink around those words. Daniel's smile finally disappeared. Nathan looked at him, and the shock in his face was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was quiet enough to show how deep it had gone. You told me the staff was leaking money, Nathan said. Daniel straightened. The reports indicated inconsistencies. Reports you gave me. Daniel said nothing. Emily unfolded the old diner receipt at last, but only halfway, keeping most of it in her palm. The paper was faded, the ink almost gone. She placed it beside her order pad, not beside the audit slip, not as evidence, only as the small memory that had taught her where to look. My father missed a line like that for months, she said. Not because he was careless, because someone made it look too boring to deserve attention. Nathan heard the sentence as if it had been meant for him alone. His test had accused the lowest paid person in the room, while the highest trusted one stood inches away from the truth. The controller continued, her voice now more formal. Mr. Whitmore, the same vendor prefix appears across multiple service adjustments authorized through Mr. Cross's administrative credentials. No one laughed now. The manager stared at the floor. One investor slowly pushed the fake bill farther from his place setting, as if distance could separate him from what he had almost dismissed. Nathan looked at Emily, then at Daniel, then at the $100 bill still untouched beside the check. His voice dropped into something almost unrecognizable. The bill was fake. Emily nodded once. Nathan swallowed. But the route was real. And with that single sentence, everyone in the glass harbor understood that the waitress had not ruined the billionaire's test. She had revealed the enemy standing inside it. Nathan Whitmore did not look at Daniel Cross first. That surprised everyone, including Daniel. The billionaire looked at the fake bill, then at the real check, then at the $100 bill that had been placed there like bait. It had not moved all night. Neither had Emily Parker's dignity. The private dining room at the Glass Harbor felt smaller now, stripped of its dark wood elegance and expensive silence. Rain pressed silver lines against the windows. The coffee had gone cold. The two investors sat very still, as if stillness could excuse how quickly they had laughed at a waitress who saw what they missed. Daniel finally spoke. "Nathan, we should take this upstairs." His voice was controlled, but the warmth had left it. "That would be best for the company." Nathan lifted his eyes. "The company is not what you are protecting." Daniel's face tightened, not dramatically, only enough to show that the sentence had found him. The finance controller remained on the phone while Nathan's assistant, called in from the hallway, quietly began forwarding the audit slips to legal counsel. No one shouted. No one rushed. The room handled betrayal the way wealthy rooms often did, with lowered voices and careful hands. Nathan turned to the manager. "Mr. Cross will wait in the conference office until legal counsel arrives. He does not access any system, file, phone, or company account." Daniel started to object, then stopped when he realized the old language of authority no longer belonged to him in that room. The manager nodded, shaken but professional, and opened the frosted glass door. Daniel walked out with the assistant beside him, not as a criminal in a spectacle, but as a trusted man whose trust had finally run out. When the door closed, the quiet left behind was heavier than the confrontation. Nathan remained standing. For the first time all evening, he looked older than 50. Not weak, just forced to meet the part of himself that had been wrong. He had built a hotel empire by testing managers, systems, vendors, and margins. Yet tonight, he had tested the person with the least power and trusted the person with the most access. Emily folded the old diner receipt again, small and careful, and slid it back into her apron pocket. She did not smile. She did not look pleased. The truth had cost her memories she had not meant to spend in front of strangers. Nathan noticed that too late. "Miss Parker," he said. The title sounded different now, less like distance and more like respect trying to learn how to stand. Emily looked up. "Yes, sir." Nathan looked at the fake bill. "I put that there because I assumed the problem began where the pay was lowest." The words did not flatter him. That was why they mattered. "I was wrong." Emily held his gaze, calm but not soft enough to rescue him from the discomfort. "People with less power learn to read the fine print," she said, "because no one fixes mistakes for them." The sentence did not accuse only Daniel. It reached Nathan too. It reached the investors. It reached the manager who had almost let her be dismissed. Nathan looked toward the door Daniel had walked through, then back at the dining room he owned, the table he controlled, the test he had designed. He could still bury the moment under a private investigation and a clean internal memo. Or he could admit that the rot had not begun with a waitress holding a tray, but with a billionaire who mistook position for trust. His hand rested beside the untouched tip, and he had to decide whether to protect his pride or finally step down from it. Nathan Whitmore did not choose the private memo. He moved the $100 bill away from the fake check and placed it flat on the table. No longer bait, no longer a test, just paper that had failed to measure the right person. Then he looked at the two investors, the manager, and the closed frosted glass door where Daniel Cross had disappeared. "This will not be handled as a quiet staffing issue," he said. "It will be handled as a failure of leadership, starting with mine." No one answered. The room had heard many wealthy men speak with confidence. It had heard very few speak with responsibility. Nathan turned to the manager. "Every property receives a billing review by outside audit. Every service adjustment tied to that vendor is frozen. Any employee who reports a billing concern is protected from retaliation, in writing, by tomorrow morning." The manager nodded slowly, as if writing the words somewhere inside himself before they reached paper. Nathan's assistant stood near the door, phone in hand, waiting for instructions that were no longer about saving face. Emily Parker remained beside the service stand, her tray empty now, her posture steady, her old folded diner receipt hidden again in the pocket of her black apron. She did not look victorious. She looked tired in the quiet way people look after they have lent a painful memory to a room that did not earn it gently. Nathan saw that, and the shame moved through him with more weight than anger had. He stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "Miss Parker," he said, "I owe you more than an apology for tonight." Emily looked at him, not cold, not softened, simply present. "You owe your employees a system that does not punish them for noticing things." Nathan lowered his eyes for a second. "Yes," he said, "and I owe you an apology for assuming your honesty needed to be tested before your judgment could be trusted." That sentence changed the room more than the audit slips had. The manager looked at Emily. One investor looked at the floor. Outside, The rain began to ease, leaving the city lights clearer against the glass. Emily reached into her apron pocket and touched the folded receipt once, not to show it, not to explain it, only to steady the part of herself that still remembered a small diner, a tired father, and the cost of ignored details. Then trust the next person sooner, she said. Nathan nodded. He did not offer her a grand promotion in front of witnesses. He did not turn her into a story for public relations. 3 weeks later, Whitmore Hospitality began an independent billing review across all 83 properties. The company created a protected reporting line for hourly staff, required manager training on invoice irregularities, and returned improper charges that had been buried under harmless language. Daniel Cross was gone through legal channels, quietly, incompletely, like a door finally closed. Emily was invited to join a paid employee advisory panel on guest trust and billing transparency. She accepted only after asking whether other servers, housekeepers, and front desk clerks would have seats too. Nathan said yes. At the first meeting, in a plain conference room with no champagne and no investors watching, Emily placed her folded diner receipt beside her notebook for one moment before sliding it back into her apron pocket. Nathan noticed, then looked away with respect. Some things did not need to be owned by the person who learned from them. When the meeting ended, he held the door open while the staff walked out first. Emily passed without lowering her eyes. Nathan did not speak until she had stepped into the hall. "Miss Parker," he said softly. She turned. "Thank you for reading the line I wanted everyone to miss." Emily looked at the man who owned the room and answered like someone who had never needed ownership to understand value. "It was never too small to matter, sir." And long after the table was cleared, the lesson remained. Never judge the truth by the apron that carries it, or the silence of the person who sees the crack before the chandelier falls.